My son-in-law tried to ruin my reputation after I kicked him out of my house, all because I refused to let him turn my retirement home, the one I built to honor my late daughter's memory, into his personal resort for him and 15 of his friends. He thought he could manipulate the world with a sob story on social media, forgetting I had a secret weapon he never saw coming. A meticulous, 6-year paper trail documenting the $290,000 secret that would expose him for the fraud he truly was. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The words he would later post on that screen felt like a physical blow, a calculated lie designed to steal the air from my lungs. But in that moment, there was only peace. It was supposed to be our place, Isabella's and mine, a fortress of peace built from a lifetime of careful planning, a sanctuary forged in her memory. But I never imagined the first siege wouldn't come from a stranger, but from the man who married my daughter and buried her with his crocodile tears. And it all started with a single, jarring phone call that shattered the silence I had worked 40 years to earn. The final cardboard box settled onto the polished concrete floor with a soft, satisfying sigh. I straightened up, my back protesting after a week of unpacking, and surveyed my creation. It was more than a house. It was a testament. A structure of glass, steel, and redwood, cantilevered over the dramatic cliffs of Carmel by the sea. Every line, every angle, was a piece of me, an echo of a 40-year career as an architect. The late afternoon sun streamed through the floor to ceiling windows, casting long golden shadows across the minimalist interior. This was it, the final project, my sanctuary. I walked through the open-plan living space, my hand gliding over the cool surface of the marble kitchen island. The air smelled of fresh paint, salty ocean spray, and the faint, woody scent of sawdust, the perfume of a new beginning. Outside, the Pacific Ocean stretched to the horizon, a brilliant, endless blue. Waves crashed against the rocks below, a rhythmic, powerful sound that vibrated through the foundation of the house itself. This was the soundtrack I had chosen for the rest of my life. My feet led me to the mantelpiece, where a single silver frame stood amidst the intentional emptiness. It was the first thing I had unpacked. Her smile, captured in a candid moment at her college graduation, was a beacon. Isabella, my daughter, my brilliant, kind-hearted girl, taken by cancer 3 years ago. The grief was no longer a tsunami that threatened to drown me daily, but a constant, quiet tide, forever pulling at the shores of my heart. I picked up the frame, my thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. Finally, Isabella, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. A place of peace, just like we dreamed. We used to sketch ideas for a house like this on napkins at diners, her youthful imagination tempering my rigid architectural logic. It was our shared fantasy, a someday that cancer had stolen from her. Building it alone had been my tribute, my way of keeping her dream alive, of giving her a permanent home in the most beautiful place I could imagine. Setting the photo back down, a sense of profound contentment washed over me. The silence was perfect. The view was sublime. The ghosts of my past were, for the first time, quiet. It was in that exact moment of absolute tranquility that my phone buzzed on the granite countertop. The vibration was harsh, an alien intrusion into my carefully curated peace. I glanced at the screen, expecting a call from my lawyer, Arthur, or perhaps the contractor finishing up the landscaping. But the name that glowed there made the blood in my veins run cold. Caleb Vance. I let the phone buzz a second time, a harsh mechanical tremor on the perfect silence of the granite. Taking a centering breath, I swiped to answer, determined to keep the conversation brief and professional. The architect in me valued precision and disliked ambiguity. Caleb, I said, my voice level. James. Great news. Caleb's voice boomed through the speaker, slick with a false bonhomie I had grown to despise. We were in the area and decided to come see your new place. We're on our way now. We? I asked, keeping my tone dangerously neutral. Yeah, the whole crew. Tiffany, Kyle, a few others. There will be 15 of us in total. We figured we'd stay for a while, really break the place in for you. 3 weeks should do it. 3 weeks. 15 people. The numbers were so absurd, so completely detached from any recognizable social contract, that for a moment I was speechless. I looked out the window at the serene Pacific, the waves cresting with white foam. The beautiful view now seemed to mock me. No, I said. The word was flat, absolute. A load-bearing wall. Not a suggestion, but a structural certainty. Caleb laughed, a short, dismissive bark. Funny, James. Anyway, we'll need you to get some things ready. Beds, towels, slippers, the usual. And stock the fridge. We'll be hungry after the drive. Oh, and Tiffany is dying to use your master bedroom. She says the morning light in there would be perfect for her yoga videos. So we'll take that one. My grip tightened on the phone, the cool metal groaning under the pressure. He wasn't asking. He was dictating terms of his occupation. Every ounce of my professional and personal life had been built on a foundation of mutual respect and clearly defined boundaries. Caleb operated as if those concepts simply didn't apply to him. He saw my life's work not as a home, but as a resource to be consumed. Listen to me very carefully, Caleb, I said, my voice dropping an octave, each word now a precisely laid brick of ice. I said no. The house is not ready for guests. You are not invited. Do not come to my property. There was a brief pause on the other end, and for a fleeting second, I thought my words had penetrated his thick skull of entitlement. Then came the sound I should have expected. Another condescending chuckle. This isn't a request, James. It's a heads up, he said, the false warmth gone, replaced by a chilling arrogance. We're already on the coastal highway. You wouldn't want to disappoint Isabella's friends, would you? See you in about 45 minutes. The line went dead. I stood frozen in my sun-drenched living room, the silent phone in my hand. He had invoked her name. The one key he knew could unlock my guilt, the one lever he always pulled. But this time, something was different. The grief was still there, but it was now eclipsed by a cold, clarifying rage. My sanctuary had been targeted for invasion. My boundaries had been bulldozed. My daughter's memory had been weaponized. I lowered the phone, my knuckles white. The rhythmic crash of the waves outside suddenly sounded like a war drum, and then, carried on the salty breeze from the winding road below my cliffs, I heard it. A faint but unmistakable sound, growing steadily louder. The rumble of multiple engines. They were coming. The rumble grew into a roar, punctuated by the crunch of tires on the gravel of my driveway. Car doors slammed 4, 5, 6 of them, a rapid-fire cacophony that echoed off the stone facade of my home like gunshots. They were here, my jaw clenched. This was my property, my sanctuary. I would not cower inside it. I strode to the grand oak door, my hand steady as I turned the heavy steel handle. I opened it just as Caleb was raising his hand to knock. He stood on my doorstep, flanked by a brutish-looking man I recognized as his friend Kyle, with a sea of expectant faces behind them. The setting sun cast them in long, distorted shadows. I said no, I stated, my voice low and hard. I raised a hand, palm out, a universal sign to halt. Caleb simply smirked, a look of pitying amusement on his face. Come on, James, don't be dramatic. We're family. As he spoke the last word, he and Kyle moved in unison. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a coordinated shove. 200 pounds of entitlement from Caleb, and at least that much from his friend, hit my shoulder like a battering ram. I stumbled backward, my feet tangling, my hips slamming hard against the sharp edge of the foyer wall. A jolt of pain shot up my spine. Before I could regain my footing, the floodgates opened. They poured into my home a tide of chattering strangers, rolling suitcases with plastic wheels that screeched across my Italian marble floors, and heavy coolers that thudded against my pristine white walls, leaving scuff marks. The scent of salt and redwood was instantly replaced by cheap beer and overpowering perfume. My carefully designed sanctuary, a space of quiet contemplation, had been transformed into a crowded bus station in under 10 seconds. I pushed myself off the wall, the pain in my hip a dull, angry throb, but it was nothing compared to the violation I felt watching these people colonize my space. A woman I'd never seen before was already running her hands over my sculptures. Kyle had headed straight for the kitchen, presumably to find glasses for the beer he was carrying. Then I saw Tiffany. She had her phone out, held high on a selfie stick, a dazzlingly fake smile plastered on her face as she panned across the chaos. "Oh my gosh, you guys, look at this place." Her voice chirped, painfully loud. "We're staying at my father-in-law's incredible new mansion. He is so generous. Look at this view." Father-in-law. Generous. The words were lies, carefully packaged for her online audience. She was turning my assault and home invasion into content, reframing their hostile takeover as a wholesome family gathering. I saw the comments starting to pop up on her screen. "Oh my God, so lucky. Adopt me." I stood there amidst the swirling chaos, my home no longer my own. Every laugh felt like an insult, every suitcase dropped like a flag planted in conquered territory. Arguing would be pointless. Yelling would only add to the noise. They didn't operate on a plane of reason or respect. They understood only force and opportunity. The architect in me saw the structural flaw in their plan. They assumed my foundation was as weak as theirs. A cold, clear purpose began to form in my mind, overriding the pain and the anger. I didn't say a word. I simply turned my back on the chaos, my limp barely noticeable, and began to walk, slowly and deliberately, toward my study. The heavy oak door of my study closed behind me with a solid, reassuring thud. I turned the deadbolt, and the sound of the tumblers clicking into place was the most satisfying thing I had heard all day. Instantly, the cacophony from the living room, the booming music, the shrieking laughter, Tiffany's performative narration was reduced to a dull, muffled throb. The soundproof insulation I had insisted on during construction was already paying for itself. For a moment, I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, the dull ache in my hip a fiery reminder of the assault. The anger was still there, a white-hot coal in my chest, but it was no longer chaotic. Here, in my inner sanctum, it began to cool, to compress, to harden into something far more dangerous. Purpose. I pushed myself away from the door and took a deep breath. The air in here was different. It smelled of old books, drafting paper, and leather. My scent. My order. My entire life's work was enshrined in this room. Blueprints for skyscrapers in Dubai and museums in Chicago were framed on the walls. My engineering and architecture degrees hung beside them, their Latin inscriptions a testament to a life built on logic, precision, and the immutable laws of physics. My reflection stared back at me from the dark, expansive window that overlooked the churning Pacific. The face I saw was not that of a shocked, violated old man. The lines of stress around my eyes had hardened. My jaw was set. The architect had taken over. The problem was simple. A hostile, invasive element had compromised the structural integrity of my home. Arguing with the infestation was illogical. Pleading with it was pointless. The only correct architectural response was a systematic, efficient removal. I walked to my desk, my movements now fluid and devoid of hesitation. I didn't reach for the phone to call my lawyer, Arthur. That was a long-term plan, the second phase of construction. This required an immediate, tactical solution. I picked up my cell phone, my fingers steady as they navigated the screen. I ignored the notifications still flooding in from Tiffany's live stream. They were irrelevant noise. I dialed 3 numbers. A calm, professional voice answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? I sat down in my leather chair, swiveled to face the ocean, and matched her tone. Yes, my name is James Rodriguez. My address is 114 Vista Del Mar, Carmel by the Sea. I'd like to report a home invasion. Sir, are you in immediate physical danger? No, I am not in immediate danger, I replied, my voice as calm as if I were discussing a zoning variance. I am secure in my locked study. However, there are approximately 15 unwanted individuals on my property who gained entry by force and are now refusing to leave. They gained entry by force, sir? Correct. I was physically assaulted at my front door. They are trespassing. I gave her a brief, factual account of the events, omitting any emotion. I listed the number of people, the time of their arrival, and my repeated verbal instructions for them to vacate the premises. It was a report, not a complaint. Okay, Mr. Rodriguez. I've dispatched officers to your location. Can you remain in your secure room until they arrive? I can, I said. Thank you. I ended the call and placed the phone gently on the desk. A profound silence seemed to settle in the room, a perfect counterpoint to the muffled chaos still seeping through the walls. I had laid the foundation. I had executed the plan. Now, I just had to wait for the system to work. And then I heard it. Faintly at first, a distant, rising cry that cut through the bass of their music. A sound that promised order was coming to reclaim my home. The wail of approaching sirens. The approaching sirens reached a crescendo, then abruptly died, replaced by the heavy slam of car doors. A moment of confused silence fell over the living room. The thumping music finally turned down. Then, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed from the front door. It wasn't the casual tap of a guest. It was the resolute summons of the law. Every head turned. The arrogant smirks vanished, replaced by nervous glances. Caleb, ever the performer, quickly composed himself, smoothing his designer shirt. "Everyone relax," he announced with forced confidence. "Let me handle this." He opened the door to two uniformed officers. One was a senior man with salt and pepper hair and a calm demeanor. The other, a younger woman with sharp, observant eyes. "Good evening, officers," Caleb began, his voice dripping with practiced charm. "So sorry for the noise. We're just having a small family get-together. I think my father-in-law might be a bit overwhelmed, maybe had a bit too much to—" "Are you Caleb Vance?" the senior officer interrupted, his tone all business. Caleb faltered. "Yes, but as I was saying, that was my cue." I opened my study door and walked into the foyer, a leather-bound folder in my hand. I ignored Caleb completely and addressed the senior officer. "I am James Rodriguez," I said calmly. "I am the owner of this property, and I am the one who called you." I opened the folder and presented the first page, a notarized copy of the property deed. The officer glanced at it, then back at me. His eyes, I noted, were professional, but not unkind. Caleb's face flushed with anger. "Now hold on. This is a family matter. James is just having a senior moment. He gets confused." The officer held up a hand, silencing him. He then turned his gaze to the room, taking in the scattered luggage, the open beer coolers, the 15 bewildered faces staring back at him. "Mr. Rodriguez," he said, turning back to me, "what would you like to happen here?" The entire room held its breath. All the power Caleb thought he had, all the social pressure he wielded, had evaporated under the clear, bright light of the law. "I want these individuals removed from my property immediately," I said, my voice steady. They were told they were not welcome, and they forced their way in. The officer nodded. He turned to face the stunned crowd. "Folks, I've seen the documentation. This is Mr. Rodriguez's private residence." He looked directly at Caleb, his expression unyielding. "Sir, family drama doesn't negate property law. The owner wants you gone." That single sentence, delivered with quiet authority, was more devastating than any shout. It was the sound of reality crashing down on their entitlement. The officer continued, "You all have 15 minutes to gather your belongings and vacate the premises. Anyone who remains after that will be placed under arrest for criminal trespassing." Panic erupted. The chaotic scramble to pack was a pathetic parody of their confident arrival. Suitcases were snapped shut, coolers were hastily repacked, and a flurry of angry whispers filled the air. Tiffany, her face a mask of mortified fury, shoved her vlogging equipment into a bag without a word. As the last of them shuffled out the door, Caleb brushed past me. He leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper meant only for my ears. "You're going to regret this, old man," he hissed, his eyes burning with a hatred that was far more honest than his fake smiles. "You have no idea what you've just started." He turned and walked away, leaving the threat hanging in the trashed, but blessedly quiet air of my reclaimed home. I woke to the gentle sound of seagulls and the soft morning light filtering through my windows. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the house was silent, truly silent. The lingering tension from the night before had dissipated with the morning fog, leaving behind a profound sense of relief. The battle was over. I had won. I made a pot of strong black coffee and sat at my kitchen island, looking out at the calm ocean. The floor was still gritty with sand, and a few stray beer cans sat on the counter, but these were just remnants, artifacts of a defeated army. I would clean them up, I would restore my order. Feeling a sense of normalcy returning, I picked up my phone to check the morning news. The screen flared to life, and my heart plummeted. 47 notifications. A cascade of alerts from Facebook, text messages, and missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Caleb's whispered threat echoed in my mind. "You have no idea what you've just started." My thumb, trembling slightly, tapped on the Facebook icon. It was the first thing on my feed. A post from Caleb, shared over 200 times in the last 8 hours. It featured a photo of Tiffany in their car, her face artfully streaked with tears, looking utterly broken. Above it, Caleb's carefully crafted words hit me like a series of punches. "Heartbroken tonight. We just wanted to visit my late wife's father, to share in his new success." Instead, my family was thrown out into the street by a man corrupted by wealth. He called the police on us on his own family like we were criminals. Money truly changes people. Isabella would be ashamed of the man her father has become. The lies were so audacious, so perfectly calibrated for maximum sympathy. They took my breath away. I scrolled down, a knot of ice forming in my stomach. The comment section was a torrent of vitriol aimed directly at me. My former neighbors expressed shock. Distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years called my behavior disgraceful. Emily's college friends wrote that they never knew I had this cruel side. My entire life, my character, was being rewritten, vandalized by people who had heard only one side of a malicious story. My fingers flew across the screen as I typed a rebuttal in the comments. "This is a complete fabrication," I wrote. "Caleb arrived with 15 uninvited people, physically assaulted me, and refused to leave when asked. Calling the police was a last resort to remove trespassers from my home." The response was instantaneous and brutal. "Classic gaslighting, James. Stop playing the victim. 15 people? Sounds like you're exaggerating to justify your disgusting behavior. You don't know the full story." "He's twisting everything," another user replied, defending Caleb. It was useless. My facts were grains of sand against a tidal wave of emotion. Caleb had framed himself as the grieving widower and me as the heartless millionaire. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was already in. I was the villain. I felt a dizzying sense of helplessness, watching my 40-year reputation for integrity being systematically dismantled by a lie. This wasn't a battlefield of logic or reason. It was a war of perception, and I was an amateur fighting a seasoned propagandist. I closed the laptop, the toxic glow of the screen still burning in my vision. My eyes drifted to the wall of my study, visible from the kitchen. I saw the framed awards, the certificates of engineering excellence, the photos of completed projects that had required thousands of hours of meticulous planning and evidence-based work. And then it hit me. I had been fighting on his territory with his rules. This wasn't about winning an argument on Facebook. This was about deconstructing a faulty structure built on lies. And that was a language I understood. My anger subsided, replaced by the familiar, cold resolve of an architect facing a complex problem. I picked up my phone again. This time, I didn't open a social media app. I opened my contacts and found the name I needed. Arthur Albright. Arthur Albright's office was the antithesis of my own home. Where my house was all glass, steel, and minimalist lines, his was a fortress of mahogany, worn leather, and floor-to-ceiling books that smelled of history and precedent. Arthur, my friend of 30 years, sat behind his massive desk, his steepled fingers hiding his mouth as I finished my story. I showed him the Facebook post on my phone, the venomous comments, the picture of Tiffany's staged tears. He listened without interruption, his sharp eyes missing nothing. When I was done, he let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation. "Vicious," he finally said, his voice a low rumble. "And effective. You're right, you can't win by arguing in his comments section. You'd be a fool to try." "So what do I do, Arthur?" I asked, the helplessness I felt that morning creeping back into my voice. "Let him destroy my name?" Arthur leaned forward, a glint in his eye I recognized from our old chess matches. "James, you're looking at this like a homeowner. You need to look at it like an architect. Caleb has built a structure, but it's a shoddy one, built on a foundation of lies. He's playing checkers on Facebook, making emotional, impulsive moves. You, my friend, are about to play chess in a federal court. The words sent a jolt of electricity through me. He was right. I had been trying to patch the cracks when I should have been inspecting the foundation. We don't fight him with emotion, Arthur continued, his voice firm. We don't fight him with denials. We fight him with discovery, with depositions, with documentation. We don't try to win his game. We make his game completely irrelevant by starting a new one, on a board he doesn't even know exists. I left his office an hour later, not with a sense of relief, but with a surge of cold, focused energy I hadn't felt in years. The helplessness was gone, replaced by a blueprint, a plan. Back home, I bypassed the pristine living areas and headed down to the basement, a space I primarily used for storage. Against the far wall stood 4 industrial-grade gray metal filing cabinets. They were relics from my old firm, containing 40 years of project files, contracts, and financial records I'd never gotten around to digitizing. My entire professional life, organized alphabetically and chronologically. My fingers, sure and steady, ran over the neatly typed labels on the drawers. Projects, MP, invoices, 1,990 to 1,995. And then, near the bottom of the 4th cabinet, a drawer labeled Personal, Family, and Estate. I pulled it open. The drawer slid out with a smooth, oiled sound. Inside, behind files for Isabella's college fund and my own estate planning, was a single, thick manila folder. The label on the tab, written in my own precise, architectural hand, sent a grim smile to my lips. It read, Caleb V. Financial Support. I lifted the folder out. It was heavier than I remembered. Placing it on a nearby workbench, I opened the cover, and there it was, right on top, preserved in perfect condition, a carbon copy of a bank check from 6 years ago. It was written to Northwestern University's bursar's office, for the exact amount of $45,000. In the memo line, 2 words stood out, clear as day. Caleb, MBA tuition. The first brick in my fortress of facts. And I knew, with chilling certainty, there were hundreds more to follow. Sunday dawned, but I didn't see the sunrise. I was already at my drafting table, the thick folder from the basement spread open under the bright, focused light of my architect's lamp. The house was silent, the chaos of Friday a distant memory. The digital storm raging on Facebook was a storm in another universe. Here, in my study, there was only order, evidence, and the quiet hum of the document scanner. The day became a montage of meticulous, focused work. This was a process I understood better than anyone. It was like preparing the foundational survey for a skyscraper. Every measurement had to be exact, every data point verified. I worked with the methodical precision that had defined my entire career. First came the scanning. Each document was a ghost from the past, a silent testament to 6 years of manipulation. The flash of the scanner illuminated them one by one. A hospital bill for Isabella's treatment, which I had paid in full, next to an email from Caleb complaining about how the financial stress was affecting him. A wire transfer receipt for the down payment on their first apartment, a place he now shared with Tiffany. A series of smaller checks, annotated with notes like car repair or property tax. Each one a leak in a dam I had foolishly kept plugging. With every document digitized, the pile of evidence grew. I laid the originals out across my massive drafting table, arranging them chronologically. What had once felt like a series of disconnected crises now revealed itself for what it was. A systematic, escalating campaign of financial exploitation. Then came the spreadsheet. I created a new file, naming it Vance, Financial Analysis. The columns were simple, clinical. Date, amount, recipient, stated purpose. And the most crucial column of all, repayment promise, verbal divided by email. Row by meticulous row. I populated the cells. The $45,000 for his MBA, the $18,000 to cover his failed startup's debt, the $60,000 down payment, the checks, the wire transfers, the credit card bailouts. With each entry, my own memory sharpened. I cross-referenced the dates with old emails I had archived, finding the digital ghosts of his promises. Just until I get back on my feet, James. I'll pay you back every penny. I swear. This is the last time, I promise. The sun began to set, casting long shadows into my study, but I didn't notice. I was lost in the numbers, in the cold, hard data of betrayal. The spreadsheet grew longer and longer, a damning indictment of his character. Finally, after hours of work, every receipt, every check, every transfer was accounted for. My hand hovered over the mouse. I selected the entire amount column, my eyes fixed on the bottom right corner of the screen. I clicked the sum function. The number that appeared made me sit back in my chair, the air leaving my lungs in a slow hiss. 29,3450美元. I stared at the figure. It wasn't just money. It was a house. It was a retirement. It was the physical manifestation of my love for my daughter, twisted and consumed by greed. I took a screenshot. My internal monologue was quiet, my voice echoing in the silent room. The foundation is poured, I thought, looking at the mountain of scanned documents. I glanced at the spreadsheet, a perfect, logical structure of proof. Now, to build the walls. I composed a new email, attached the spreadsheet, and typed in Arthur's address. The subject line was simple, containing only 2 words. Final blueprint. I hit send. Monday morning arrived not with the chaos of the weekend, but with the quiet, focused intensity of a project launch. I sat in my study, a fresh cup of coffee steaming beside me, the Pacific, a calm, steely blue in the morning light. My phone was on speaker, resting on the desk. "All right, James," Arthur's voice crackled through the phone, crisp and professional. "It's done." The civil complaint for recovery of funds and defamation was filed with the Monterey County Superior Court at 8:45 a.m. It's been assigned a case number. The process server is on his way to Mr. Suve Vance's address right now. The legal gears are turning. "Thank you, Arthur," I said, my own voice calm. The legal foundation was now poured and set. It was time to erect the frame. "Your turn," he said. "Remember, stick to the facts. No emotion, no accusations. Let the documents do the talking." "Understood," I replied, and ended the call. I turned to my laptop. I had already written the post, editing it with Arthur the night before until it was as clean and precise as a blueprint. There was no rage in the words, no plea for sympathy. It was a statement of fact, an addendum to a public record that had been maliciously falsified. I navigated to my Facebook page, found Caleb's viral post still littered with sympathetic comments, and clicked the button to create a new post of my own. I copied and pasted the text from my document. It read, "In light of recent posts concerning my family, and for the sake of clarity, I am providing a factual record. Over the past 6 years, I provided my son-in-law, Caleb Vance, with significant financial support, intended to help him during difficult times following my daughter's illness and passing. These were documented transactions. A summary is as follows. May that tuition, Northwestern University. Patruzeci și cinci, 0, startup business debt resolution, $18,000. Apartment down payment and furnishings, $60,000. Automobile purchase and insurance, $28. Wubai. Credit card debt. Consolidation, $32. Direct medical bill payments, Isabella, $85,000. Miscellaneous personal loans, $24,950. Total financial support provided, $293,450. A lawsuit to recover a portion of these funds was filed this morning in Monterey County Superior Court. Attached is a summary document. Facts are stubborn things. I will let them and the legal system speak for themselves. I attached the screenshot of the spreadsheet, a clean, undeniable grid of numbers, dates, and broken promises. I made sure to tag Caleb, Tiffany, and every mutual friend who had commented on his original post. My finger hovered over the post button. This was it. The culmination of a weekend of focused anger. This was not an emotional outburst. It was a demolition charge, placed with architectural precision at the base of his fraudulent narrative. I clicked. The post went live. For a single, silent second, nothing happened. The screen was still. Then, at the top right corner of the page, the small, red notification icon lit up with the number 1. A moment later, it flashed to 3, then 7, then 15. A digital wildfire had just been ignited, and I had struck the match. The comments were starting to pour in. I didn't need to refresh the page. Facebook's algorithm, designed for maximum engagement, did the work for me. The notification counter in the corner of my screen was no longer a number. It was just a blurry red circle, spinning uselessly as it tried to keep up. For the next hour, I became a silent observer from my command center, watching the digital wildfire I had started consume the forest of lies Caleb had planted. The first wave was on my own post. The comment section was a flood of shock and disbelief. Then came the apologies. Margaret Chen, Isabella's college friend who had been so quick to judge, was one of the first. "James, I am so deeply sorry. I spoke without knowing the facts. What you did for him is astounding. What he did to you is unforgivable." My former neighbor, who had called my actions disgraceful, quietly deleted his comment. The second wave was far more brutal, and it crashed directly onto Caleb's original post. I navigated to his page. The tearful photo of Tiffany was now buried under an avalanche of furious comments. The sympathy had curdled into pure rage. "Wait, so you took $290K from him and then called him cruel for not letting you stay for free?" That comment, from a user I didn't know, had thousands of likes. It perfectly summarized the absurdity of his position. My God, the audacity. "You used your dead wife's father as a personal ATM and then tried to ruin him when he finally said no?" Another wrote. Then, I noticed something else. I searched for Kyle's supportive share of Caleb's post. It was gone. I checked Ashley's page, the woman who had been so eager to claim my guest room. Her share had also vanished. Like rats deserting a sinking ship, Caleb's 15 loyal friends were scrambling to delete any evidence of their allegiance, hoping to escape the digital shrapnel. Around 2 p.m., a notification popped up. "Tiffany Vance is live now." A morbid curiosity I couldn't resist made me click. She was in her pristine white kitchen, attempting to film a sponsored post for a ridiculously expensive blender. She was trying to project an aura of calm, aspirational wellness, but her eyes kept darting to the comment feed. I could see why. The stream was a waterfall of fury. Number Team James, number Justice for James, number Return the Money. Her serene smile began to twitch. "Okay, guys, let's just focus on the positive vibes today," she stammered, but the comments kept coming. Her face crumbled. The mask of the perfect influencer cracked, revealing the panicked, shallow person beneath. She abruptly ended the broadcast. At that exact moment, an email notification appeared on my screen. It was from Arthur's office. The subject, Service of Process. I opened it. The body was short and professional. "Mr. Rodriguez, this is to confirm that service of the summons and complaint on Mr. Caleb Vance was successfully completed at his residence at 2:15 p.m. today." I pictured the scene with perfect clarity. Caleb, reeling from the digital inferno, watching his wife have a meltdown on a failed live stream, and then, the final, perfect touch, a knock on the door, and a stoic stranger handing him a thick legal envelope. The second front of the war had just opened up in his living room. I closed the laptop. The digital noise faded. The sun was beginning its slow descent over the Pacific, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. My phone, which had been buzzing all day with messages of support, suddenly rang with an incoming call. I looked at the screen. The name displayed was Caleb Vance, and I knew with absolute certainty the tone of this call would be very different from the last one. I sat on my terrace, a glass of Pinot Noir resting on the table beside me. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky bruised with purple and orange. The air was cool, the only sound the rhythmic sigh of the waves below. The digital storm had passed. The war for public opinion was over. I had won. When the phone rang, vibrating softly against the teak tabletop, I didn't flinch. I looked at Caleb's name on the screen, took a slow sip of wine, and then answered, putting it on speaker. James? His voice was nothing like the arrogant boom I was used to. It was thin, reedy, cracked with a panic he couldn't conceal. I could hear the frantic sound of passing cars in the background, the frantic beat of his own ragged breathing. James, thank God. Listen, we need to talk. This has all been a terrible misunderstanding. We're family. I cut him off. The word, once a source of guilt, was now just an empty sound. Family does not do what you did, Caleb, I said, my voice as cold and calm as the evening air. That conversation is over. There is nothing left for you and I to discuss. No, no, please. The desperation in his voice was palpable, the sound of a master manipulator who had lost all his strings. Please, James, you can't do this. The lawsuit. Tiffany is a wreck. Her sponsors are dropping her. The things people are saying. I'll pay you back, I swear. I'll start tomorrow. I'll get a second job. Whatever it takes. Just call it off. The begging was pathetic. This was the man who had shoved me against my own wall, who had used my daughter's memory as a weapon, who had tried to brand me a monster to the entire world. Now, faced with consequences for the first time, he was dissolving into a puddle of self-pity. I let him finish his frantic, rambling plea, the silence stretching for a few seconds after he was done, amplifying his desperation. He had built this disaster for himself, brick by brick. Now he wanted me, the architect of his ruin, to stop the demolition. I picked up my wine glass, swirling the dark liquid. All communications will now go through my attorney, Caleb, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. I was merely stating a fact. I paused, letting the finality of it sink in, and then delivered the last words I ever intended to speak to him directly. You chose this blueprint. Now you get to see it built. I ended the call before he could respond, the sharp click echoing in the twilight. I didn't block his number. It wasn't necessary. He was irrelevant now, a problem that had been solved, a structural flaw that had been scheduled for removal. I took another sip of wine, the taste rich and complex on my tongue. The immediate personal conflict was over. I had won. But the structure of justice required more than a single phone call. It required process. It required a foundation of law. The rest of this would be handled by professionals, in a room designed for facts, not feelings. A space built of marble and wood, where truth was the only accepted currency. A courtroom. The courtroom was an architectural study in authority. Dark wood paneling, soaring ceilings, and heavy velvet curtains, all designed to make the individual feel small, to impress upon them the weight of the justice system. For the first time in a week, I felt a sense of calm that mirrored the peace of my own home. This, too, was a place of order, a structure built on a foundation of rules and facts. I sat beside Arthur, our files arranged neatly before us. Across the room, Caleb was a stark contrast. His designer suit looked rumpled, his face was pale and drawn, and he kept whispering frantically to his court-appointed lawyer, a young, overwhelmed man who looked as if he'd rather be anywhere else. The hearing began. After Arthur gave a brief, powerful summary of our complaint, backed by the mountain of evidence we had submitted, Caleb's lawyer stood. He cleared his throat, his voice lacking conviction. Your Honor, he began, my client maintains that these transactions were never loans. They were gifts, offered freely from a father-in-law to his son-in-law during a period of shared grief and family support. No? Judge Maria Santos, a sharp woman in her late 50s with intelligent eyes that missed nothing, listened patiently. When he was finished, she looked down at the pile of documents before her, a faint, almost imperceptible frown on her lips. Gifts, she repeated, the word hanging in the air. Counselor, I have here Exhibit C, a printout from your client's wife's Instagram account, dated 3 days after Mr. Rodriguez transferred $15,000 for what was described as an emergency roof repair. She held up the printout. It was a crystal-clear photo of Tiffany posing with a new, obscenely expensive designer handbag. The caption reads, Hubby surprised me with a little treat, number blessed. Does this look like a family in dire need of financial gifts? Caleb's lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer. Furthermore, Judge Santos continued, her voice cutting through the silence, the argument of gifts is directly contradicted by your own client's words. I direct your attention to Exhibit D, an email from Mr. Vance to Mr. Rodriguez dated April 14th of last year. She peered over her glasses at Caleb, whose face had gone from pale to sheet white. It reads, "Thank you again, James. I swear I will pay back every penny as soon as this new deal closes." An odd way to refer to a gift, wouldn't you agree? The trap had sprung. Caleb was cornered, impaled on the spikes of his own lies and digital footprints. Judge Santos leaned forward, her gaze locking onto Caleb. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the immense weight of the law. "Mr. Vance, I have a file here that documents 6 years of consistent financial support from Mr. Rodriguez, and I have a digital footprint from you and your wife that tells a story of lavish spending and public deception. These two stories do not align." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Your digital footprint seems to tell a very different story than the one you're telling me now. Which one should I believe?" It was over. I saw it in Caleb's eyes. The fight, the arrogance, the manipulation, it all drained away, leaving behind a hollowed-out man. He slumped in his chair and whispered something to his lawyer. The young lawyer stood, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "my client is prepared to accept the settlement agreement as proposed by the plaintiff." The gavel fell with a sharp, clean crack, a sound of absolute finality. I felt Arthur's hand briefly squeeze my shoulder, but my eyes were on the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom. I stood, nodded respectfully to the judge, and walked away. I didn't look back at Caleb. He was a faulty structure, now condemned. I pushed open the courthouse doors and stepped out into the bright California Sunday. I took a deep, clean breath, the air tasting of freedom. That evening I didn't celebrate. There was no triumphant toast, no phone call to Arthur to rehash the victory. Instead, I sat in my study, the room that had served as my war room, and simply listened to the silence. It was a different kind of silence now, not the tense, anticipatory quiet of the past week, but a deep, resonant peace. The peace of a completed project, of a structure finally sound and secure. My laptop was open, not out of anxiety, but out of a need for closure. A notification from Arthur contained a link to Caleb's Facebook page. I clicked it. There, at the top of his feed, was his public humiliation, rendered in the sterile, passionless language of the law. The post had no photo, no emotional preamble. It was stark, black text on a white background. "Pursuant to a legally binding settlement agreement, I wish to formally retract my previous statements posted on this platform regarding my father-in-law, James Rodriguez. My characterization of the events that occurred on Friday date contained incomplete information and created a misleading representation of the facts. I apologize for any misrepresentation and for the distress my posts have caused." I read it twice. There was no remorse in it, only the cold iron cage of legal obligation. It was perfect. It wasn't an apology from the heart. It was a surrender on paper, a public monument to his defeat. I closed the tab. As if on cue, my phone chimed with a different notification. It wasn't a social media alert. It was from my banking app. I opened it. A single line of text glowed on the screen. "Incoming wire transfer confirmed. $4,166.67. Sender, Vance, Caleb. The first of 36 payments. The first tangible consequence." It wasn't about the money. It was about the accountability. It was the sound of a debt, long ignored, finally beginning to be paid. A third chime followed minutes later, a text message from a number I recognized as my former neighbor, the one who had been so quick to condemn me. "James," the message read, "I saw Caleb's post. I'm not sure what to say, other than I am deeply and truly sorry. I jumped to a conclusion without hearing your side, and I am ashamed of myself. I hope you can forgive me." I looked at the message for a long time. Forgiveness. It was a complex architectural concept. Some structures were damaged but could be repaired, reinforced to be stronger than before. Others were compromised at the foundation, their integrity gone forever. The trust I had in this man was the latter. I typed a reply, my words polite, but with a new, unbreachable boundary wall built within them. "Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the sentiment. I wish you and your family all the best. And I hit send. It was a closure, not an invitation. Finally, I put the phone down and stared at it for a moment. It was a conduit, a gateway that had allowed so much chaos to pour into my peaceful world. It was time to seal the last crack. I picked it up one last time, opened my contacts, and found his name. Caleb Vance. My finger hovered over the red delete contact button. There was no anger, no hesitation. It was the calm, decisive action of an architect removing a condemned, unsafe structure from a city blueprint. I pressed delete. Then I did the same for Tiffany Vance. The names vanished. The connection was severed. The project was, at last, complete. The days that followed were quiet in a way I hadn't experienced before. It wasn't the tense, fragile silence of waiting for the next crisis, but the deep, grounding silence of true peace. I spent the time reclaiming my space, not just by cleaning it, but by truly inhabiting it. The boxes of artwork I'd collected over the years were finally opened. A striking abstract canvas was hung in the foyer, where I had been shoved against the wall. A collection of architectural photographs now lined the hallway where the unwelcome parade had marched. Each piece I placed was an act of restoration, a declaration that this house was a home, a reflection of my life, not a hotel for the entitled. While sorting through a box of old family photos, I came across one from a 4th of July barbecue years ago. In it, a much younger Isabella was laughing, her arms slung around her cousin David. He was a good kid, my sister's son, an aspiring graphic designer. We hadn't spoken much since Isabella's passing, not out of any animosity, but simply because the currents of life had pulled us in different directions. Caleb had never been fond of my side of the family, and his presence had, I now realized, subtly isolated me. Looking at the photo, I felt a pang of regret. In building walls to keep the toxicity out, I had perhaps made them too high, inadvertently walling myself in. Caleb had shown me the worst of what a family connection could be. Maybe it was time to remember the best. On impulse, I picked up my phone, found David's number, and dialed. He answered on the third ring, his voice surprised but warm. "Uncle James? Wow, it's great to hear from you. How are you?" "I'm well, David. I'm well," I said, and for the first time, I felt the truth of those words. I've settled into my new place out in Carmel, and I was just thinking, there's no pressure at all, but if you ever find yourself with a free weekend, the guest room is officially ready and waiting. There was a pause, and for a moment I braced myself for the hesitation, the calculation, the weighing of opportunity that I had grown so accustomed to. Instead, I was met with genuine warmth. "Are you kidding? I'd love that," he said, his voice bright with enthusiasm. "Of course, Uncle James. Just let me know what time works best for you. I'd love to come see the place and catch up properly." The simplicity and respect in his response were a balm to a wound I hadn't realized was still so tender. "Let me know what time works for you." The words were a revelation. It was the language of consideration, of mutual respect. It wasn't the language of entitlement. After we'd arranged for him to visit the following month, I hung up the phone, a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon Sunday. I finally understood the fundamental difference, the vast, unbridgeable canyon between a request and a demand. Caleb had seen my home as a commodity, a venue he was owed access to. David saw it as my home, and an invitation to enter it as a gift. I walked over to the mantelpiece, my gaze settling on Isabella's smiling face. For years I had believed that honoring her memory meant tolerating the man she had loved. I realized now how wrong I had been. Honoring her meant cherishing the genuine, respectful, and loving connections she had brought into my life, and protecting them and myself from those who would exploit them. I smiled back at her photo. A true, peaceful smile, unburdened by guilt, unshadowed by obligation. It was a smile that was all my own. A month later, the late afternoon sun once again bathed my terrace in a familiar golden light. But this time, I wasn't alone. Across the teak table, my nephew David laughed, the sound easy and genuine. We were sharing a simple meal of grilled fish and vegetables, the salty air mingling with the scent of charcoal and rosemary. His visit had been everything Caleb's had not. He had arrived at the agreed-upon time, carrying a bottle of wine and a thoughtful gift for the house. He had marveled at the architecture with an artist's eye, asking intelligent questions about sightlines and structural loads. He had helped with the dishes without being asked and treated my home with the quiet reverence of a welcome guest. It was a relationship of easy, mutual respect. A bridge, not a toll road. "I've got to head out soon, Uncle James," he said, glancing at his watch. "Long drive back. But thank you, really. This place is incredible. You deserve it." After I saw him off, I returned to the terrace alone. The sun was kissing the edge of the Pacific, the sky a breathtaking canvas of crimson and violet. I poured myself a small glass of the same Pinot Noir from that tumultuous Monday evening. The bottle was a reminder, a marker of how far I had come. On the table next to me sat Isabella's photo. I had replaced the cracked glass, and her face now smiled out at me, clear and bright. I picked up my glass and raised it to her image, a silent toast between a father and the memory of his daughter. For so long, I had believed that generosity meant having no walls, no barriers. I thought that to honor her kind spirit, I had to keep my doors and my life wide open. As an architect, I should have known better. The greatest structures, the most welcoming and generous of spaces, libraries, museums, cathedrals, homes, are not defined by their openness, but by the strength and integrity of their walls. They are safe, they are nurturing, they are beautiful, because they have boundaries. A building without a solid foundation and well-defined walls is not a sanctuary. It is a ruin waiting to happen. My generosity hadn't been the problem. The flaw had been in the design. I had built a life of boundless giving with no foundation of self-respect to support it. Caleb hadn't created the weakness. He had simply been the earthquake that exposed it. The events of the past month had been a painful, necessary demolition. And from the rubble, I had finally learned how to build something new, something stronger. I looked at Isabella's face, at the warmth in her eyes, and the final piece of the blueprint clicked into place. Protecting her legacy wasn't about enabling the worst in others in her name. It was about living up to the best in myself, embodying the principles of integrity, strength, and wisdom I had always tried to teach her. I took a sip of wine, the taste rich and full on my tongue, and whispered to her across the quiet space between worlds. "I think you'd be proud, Isabella. Generosity is a structure that requires a strong foundation of self-respect. I finally built it right." The last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, and I sat in the peaceful twilight, my home secure, my heart, at long last, whole. This story, in the end, wasn't just about a house or about money. It was about the architecture of our own lives. For years, I believed that a generous heart meant having no walls, that love required leaving every door unlocked. But I learned that the most beautiful, most welcoming structures are the ones with the strongest foundations and the clearest boundaries. A fortress isn't a prison. It is a sanctuary, designed to protect what is precious within. True generosity isn't about letting the world run rampant through your halls. It's about having the wisdom to know who to welcome through the gate and who must be kept outside the walls. We all have a sanctuary to protect our peace of mind, our financial security, our emotional well-being. We are the sole architects of these spaces, and it is not selfish, but necessary, to defend their integrity. What this ordeal taught me is that it's never too late to pick up the blueprints of your life and redesign them. It is never too late to reinforce a foundation of self-respect and declare, calmly and without apology, this far and no further. What did you think of James's final blueprint for peace? Have you ever had to build a wall to protect your own sanctuary? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories build a community, and we draw strength from knowing we are not alone in these fights. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more tales of justice and hard-won wisdom.